All right, we're coming up to our next topic. You see it behind me. It's a Green Games guide. I'm very curious what we will hear now in the next half hour. And I would love to introduce you to Jean-François Gagnier, Head of Studio Plan B, Next Move, and Eric Price, President of Japaneem Games, sorry about that, and inside the board of directors of GAMA, and they will tell us how to make games greener. Welcome on stage.
Hey, there we go.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Jean-François.
And I'm Eric Price.
And like our gracious host said, we're here to talk about the Greens Game Guide. Actually, there was a monitor somewhere. Oh, here we are. All right. So what is the Green Games Guide? Some of you may ask. This is an initiative that was started by people both involved in the sustainability industry, so to speak, as well as the gaming industry. So you have here part of the gaming industry side of the Greens Game Guide. This is an initiative that was started, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And we published our first version of the White Book earlier this year, or was it last year? It was last year. When that book is meant to be an evolving document, and we'll be touching on that as we go on with the presentation. But why do this in the first place?
So there's obviously us and several other people in the industry are very thoughtful about manufacturing of games. We want to be more mindful of production. Mostly it's factories we're talking to and publishers and trying to educate publishers on best practices and educate manufacturers as well. But there's retailers we talk with, there's game designers, there's all kinds of people within the industry that have input on what we're working with. There's several people that are on our board that come from different facets of the industry, and so it's been great to get that input from all over.
So as we all know, and as was talked about, climate change is a threat to humanity and nature. It is something that we can't avoid year in, year out now. We talk a lot more about these weather events that are, well, definitely not like they were when I was a kid. We're talking about floodings, fires, and all that type of stuff affecting every country around the planet.
Yes, I'm sure you've all seen the huge changes happening to our planet right now. And while we can't change those immediately, we can't make those changes, every little step does help at least curb the effects overall. Some of the biggest things that we're working on is trying to reduce plastic in games. As we know that can be very bad for our environment, the production of plastic and usage of plastic, but there's many different aspects to all that we're working on.
And so, because climate change is not the only challenge, we have ecosystem destructions, we have wildlife that is in free fall, and we've already talked about plastic. And you know, we hear about these news about plastic islands and such things. And so that is kind of the starting point that leads us to what we want to do and achieve with this Green Games Guide that is available now, by the way.
Yeah, so what the biggest thing we've done, I mean, we've done a lot of the research on what has been done, or at least compiling that research into the Green Games Guide. We really recommend reading through it, as case studies are in there, ideas on how you could improve your production and choices you can make to be more mindful of sustainability in production. But a lot of what I'm trying to work on at this point, and JF as well, is the education of the industry. As I said, I mean, I feel like a lot of the research has been done, or most of the research. It is a living document. We're continuing to work on it, but educating the entire industry on best choices that they can be working on is my most important thing that I'm trying to do myself. Recently, I'm also on the board of directors for GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association, and I recently created a sustainability committee aside from our work on Green Games Guide, and we're trying to pull in people from different aspects of the industry into that. So if anybody is interested in this topic, I'm sure everybody here is, and would like to be part of that, that's something that I personally would like to connect with people on as well.
And that's part of the reason why we were super happy to hear that Spiel was doing these talks this year, is to put people that are working towards that same goal in contact, so that we can help each other, because we all have the same end game. We all have the same goal, and so by being in touch, and this is something that we've all initiated on the French side with Liège, who have done some studies when it comes to what is the impact of board games in terms of the carbon emission and things like that. And so we're trying to, foster and build that community so that we can work together.
Yeah, and one thing that we just talked about at the beginning of this is we're going through this, since it's not a huge crowd here. If people have any questions that they would like to throw at us as we're talking about things, we're kind of leaving it open. If you have any questions you'd like to bring up or topics you'd like to bring up during our discussion, it's kind of treating it a little more like a round table, if you will. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions as we're going through things.
Great. So, I mean, we're starting with this. Why are we here? Why are we at Essen? Well, it starts because we love games. We want to make them better, and we want them to make a lasting impact on the planet for the players. And I mean, that's why else would we be here at Essen, right? If we did not love games. So what is the Green Games Guide? Well, it's a guide that talks about sustainability. It's free and available to all board games creators. It was published under a free license, open license to ensure that anybody can use it. It translates environmental science into practical steps to become more sustainable. And actually, as part of the group, we have people that work closely with university in Melbourne or Sydney, allowing us to work with students that help us get some of that research that otherwise we may not be able to do.
Compiling information from research that's already been done is mostly what it is. Honestly, we're not a group of scientists. We're not going out and doing the hardcore research ourselves. It's mostly compiling the research that's already been done into a document that people can use as a resource for their own production choices. And if people are game publishers talking to their factories, and they want to talk to those factories about choices that can improve what the manufacturers are already doing, asking them, hey, can you do things without spot UV coating? Can you do things without putting so much plastic in the game? Do a paper tray rather than a plastic tray? Just kind of educating people on choices and decisions they can make to be more sustainable.
And just going back to the previous presentation, which was fantastic, by the way, I quite appreciated the fact that there was a focus on the game design aspect, because that really is where it starts. If the designers are coming to publishers, which is where I'm sitting now, and they're coming at us with games that don't factor, into account, have in mind, miniatures or things like that, that's already the first step. And you've touched upon education. I think that's, as people in the industry, that's going to be one of our upcoming challenges, which is not just educating people inside the industry, but also the players, because some of these changes that we need to do on a production standpoint, there is an impact on what players can expect. And so it's also about educating players as to what are the reasons behind the changes that publishers are making.
Educating the consumers to vote with their dollars on games, on products they're buying, that they know where the publishers are making those correct choices or the choices that are correct for the environment. So it's hitting every aspect of that channel with the consumers, the retailers, the publishers, and the manufacturers.
So the guide is based on two principles. First is being climate positive. It's driving actions that aim to minimize emissions in games, but also trying to minimize the natural resources that are being used in the economy. So really focusing on trying to have that be a circular economy, so reducing, reusing, recycling.
And there's a lot within that, with different types of products that you can put into your games. And if you take a look at the Green Games Guide, you'll see how we've broken it down into different types of components in the games and best choices that can be used. And a question out there.
Yeah. So for circular economy, did you guys take into account the fact that recycling, for example, they talked about Mighty Bulls, they used Rewood in one of the most recent campaigns, but they really had issues with scaling with those issues? Like, for example, did you guys take that into account with the guide as well? That if there's too much demand, that those greener options aren't actually sustainable in the long run with production values?
I don't know where things stand with Rewood at this point. I know when it first was announced, and I learned a little bit about it, and it was in the beginning stages. So I wouldn't say that it's been taken into account yet, but that may be in the next adaptation. But I definitely would like to know more about the subject. There's obviously Rewood is a brand, but there's other similar products out there, and that's something we were looking at earlier this year.
And so this is something we've already talked about a little bit, how to make games more sustainable. So today, and this is something that is shifting, but a lot of the games that we see still don't necessarily have sustainability in mind when they're being made either at the designer level or at the publisher level. So step one is trying to reduce the number of components that are needed in games. I mean, Kickstarter campaigns are still going strong with these games that have huge boxes, a lot of elements that may or may not be necessary for the full game experience. So step one is really aiming to use less. Choosing better material comes next, and that's where the Green Games Guide, that's where the focus of this first iteration has been, is in presenting alternatives and ways for be it designers but also publishers to think differently about the components they use.
And a lot of that is not just about whether those products in the game are going to be recycled and composted. We're also talking about most games obviously are not being purchased and then people take them apart and throw them into the trash. They're actually sitting on somebody's shelf and hopefully being played. So it's mostly about the production of the games is the biggest part, like the creation of plastics within the games is damaging to our environment in the first place. There is the aspect of using recyclable products within the games is a benefit, but that's a lesser benefit than producing products that aren't going to make that damage in the first place.
And that's actually talking about recyclable and what happens to games. And this is one of the findings from the study that the UEG did in France a couple of years back, is that games, they don't end up in the trash. They stay in people's collections, and there are things being put in place where, you know, give it back, give the game back, keep the game in circulation and not just, you know, throw it away once you're done with it. Package mindfully. So we've talked a lot about materials, we've talked about components, but there's also the size of the packaging. And this is something that I think more and more are being conscientious. Part of that was probably a side effect of cost of maritime shipments going up a whole lot during the COVID time. So it's brought people to think differently about the size of packaging and all of that. But this is something that we also keep in mind because that transportation, that's also a big source of carbon emission when it comes to board games.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because my company, Japanime Games, we work with a lot of Japanese companies. That's the mainstay of our products. And in Japan, you may have heard of Oink Games. Companies like that make games very, very small, tight in the packaging, and they are not using any excess space, and that's kind of the Japanese way. In America, on the other hand, where I'm based, everybody's looking for bigger boxes, bigger production, and a big waste of space because it looks bigger and it's therefore worth more money. And it's a different mindset, and that is in the education to the consumer. Treating the consumer in a way where they know that just because it's a big empty box doesn't mean it's more valuable. It's better for transportation, it's wasteful to make a gigantic box full of air.
And finally, is aiming for renewable and nature-based offsets.
Yeah, there's. It goes without saying, of course.
Yeah, that's kind of the end goal there.
Right.
So the guide, which is available as a PDF online, it features a variety of material selections. The first version of the guide focused on wood components, paper components, cardboard, and plastic. Like we've talked about, we talked about packaging in the box, the impact of that, and then along the guides we have some case studies. There's actually something that we're working on with Elena Capel from Burt Island Games, who recently, I believe it was a Kickstarter campaign, which is the second version of Endeavor, and she really followed through the guide in terms of like changing some of the materials and what would be in the game. So those case studies are very important for us, both because they're kind of the first ones coming after the guides come out, but the case studies that are there are also because people have been thinking about this for a few years at this point.
And that leads into something I want to talk about, which is the award that we put, the Sustainability Award that we put into the Origins Awards last year. Origins Game Fair is run by Gamma, and I worked with them to create an award to create more case studies, actually, to show and represent the games where the publishers are making those choices, and just to award them for doing so. And the winner of the award was Earthborn Rangers, which was a game that made so many sustainable choices in the production. It wasn't just a basic game that was like a deck of cards. I mean, obviously, a basic deck of cards is pretty sustainable compared to a lot of games that are out there full of plastic. But Earthborn Rangers, the designers and the manufacturers, thanks Frank, came up with all these great ideas to improve on that game, and that's why we awarded, well, the award to that game. So that was a very cool thing that we worked on last year. We're going to be doing it again next year. So I'm pretty happy with how all that worked out.
Yeah. So here's an example of what you'll find in the GGG and how it's kind of structured. This is a section about wood, cardboard, and paper because, well, it all comes back to wood at the end of the day when we're talking about these materials. And so the way, why worry about wood, cardboard, and paper? Poor forestry practices, huge source of carbon emissions, of course, illegal logging and deforestation, which leads to loss of biodiversity and habitat. And so as part of the guides, in addition to these explanations, we get to these graphs that really kind of showcase what we should aim for. At the bottom is generally what is perceived as being some of the current practices. And so here we have non-certified virgin paper and wood when it comes to, the section we're talking about. And at the bottom, you'll find some examples of why it is currently an issue. Above that, we showcase what are some better ways to do this when it comes to wood and paper. So here we're talking about, instead of just going with whatever is being offered to you by your manufacturer, going for FFC certified or PEFC certified wood and paper components.
And a big driving force of that is happening in Europe in the next year with, there's going to be, well, fines put on people that aren't, or producers that aren't looking for FSC certified plantations, and trying to make those choices. And I think that's really a good thing for the whole planet, to put those into place and make people and producers consider that with their production. And I hope we see that in the States too.
And then there's even better. So when we look at FFC, there's actually a variety of FFC type paper. You'll have FFC that is still brand new paper and products. Then you'll have mixed, which is recycled wood and paper. And then as the best practice, which is the next one, is FFC 100% recycled. Now, there are certain considerations that do come into play here when we deal with the type of recycled paper that we deal that. There are certain limits that current production capacities and capabilities allow us to do. If you want your printing to look nice, you still want the games to look good. At the end of the day, they're still consumer goods. So that means that 100% recycled paper right now will not necessarily be an option, but it's still, we want to set the bar as high as possible in terms of objectives and what we want to achieve. That was the next one.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Oh, hey, we made it to the end. I thought we had the next section in there.
No, that was just the one section on wood. So, like we've said, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to meet people in Europe because this has been like U.S. and Australia centric, really, at this point,
it
in terms of the initiative. So, if you know anybody that'd be interested in helping us out, and especially right now, we're looking for people that have a bit of an eye on marketing and communication, because that is an area where, hey, if you haven't heard about us, well, that's part of the reason, because we're all very busy in the industry, and so we're definitely looking to grow this. And I know that I do want to get in touch with Dr. and Professor there so that we can collaborate more and really bring all of these initiatives together.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm working on within Gamma as well, because we have a whole media and events section of Gamma, and I'm hoping we can bring some good people from that side. Even though media and events, of course, aren't producing much, they're not the side of the industry that's working on sustainable choices when they're with production. However, there's many people in that part of our industry that want to help spread the word. So again, even if you're not making a thing, if this is something that you find very important to you, I'd love to hear from you. And I have some cards here if anybody would like one at the end.
Same, and we're actually working on the update to the guide, which will include metal and cloth, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, yeah.
So that's the next step.
And we have a question.
The guide?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Okay. I have to repeat my question for the video. I think everything is recorded. I was wondering if you were working on a digital version of the guide.
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit more about that?
What do you mean by digital version of the guide? Just to be
digital games, so not the physical board games, but...
Oh,
so
for digital games.
Yeah, so our focus is actually exclusively on board games at this point.
And physical products, yeah.
Thank you. Well, I actually work in digital games, and I can say there's a whole bunch of initiatives happening there, which is really interesting to see the two industries. Excuse me. One of the areas that has been a discussion amongst us is how you approach this from a public point of view, because while ostensibly, you'd think, well, you'd like to think this would just be a no-brainer. Most people would like their game to be produced in a less damaging way to the environment. Unfortunately, climate, like many other issues, get caught up in culture wars, and then I remember seeing somebody posted a thing online where there was a Fox News segment, and it's like Xbox had done a thing where they power down the machine if you're not using it. It saves you energy, and it's like, oh, Xbox has gone woke. It's like, what? It's just ridiculous now. My point being, do you feel one tack, and like you say in there, is to say, if you produce the games that are smaller, the postage costs are lower. It's a benefit to you as a consumer because it's more efficient use of your money because things cost you less. Or would it be a benefit to say to the consumer, this is produced more sustainably, or would it be a benefit to just focus on the industry end of it? And again, it's a thing that I've been discussing, where do you talk to a consumer and say, we've reduced the energy usage of this game, so you pay less electricity, that's good, or do we say to the consumer, this game is producing less carbon, when you play it, that's good, or we just focus on the industry side? I wondered your thoughts there.
I think there's a whole lot, at least for producing physical products, that makes a whole lot of sense to educate the consumer to the point where they're going to want to make those choices with their dollars. And again, that is the focus of what we're working on, is the physical products in the game industry. But for the digital, that's an interesting question. I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of uproar in the world about blockchain and what that does for the environment as well, right? So I'm certain that is something that really impacts the consumer thinking. We've seen that with Kickstarter, where Kickstarter made a big issue for themselves by announcing, was it last year? I think it was early last year, where they announced that they were going to move it to a platform based off blockchain. They didn't say why they were doing it or whatever, but a lot of people in the industry got very angry about it and decided they weren't using Kickstarter anymore, even though they didn't even know why they were doing or what they were doing. So, I mean, there's impacts for statements of that nature, of course. I think that there's a benefit for consumers and people in the industry for telling them how you're making things, being mindful of energy usage, for sure. Yes? Oh, here comes a microphone. Although I could probably hear you from here. Don't say it too loud.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the Green Games Guide when it first came out, and I'm pleased to hear it's expanding. I wanted to ask about, and I know it's not in there at the moment, but if there's scope to think about the sort of digital aspects of physical game development. So I'm thinking particularly the use of AI art, say, for example, in, say, board game illustration and design and those kinds of things. I know, obviously, with the resources you've got, you've done a great job looking at the production side, but the development side, right, people using digital tools, and obviously AI has got a huge ecological impact, one that's poorly understood, I think, at the moment. Do you think there's scope to kind of expand your research and your sort of advocacy work around that sort of area? Is that something you're interested in? I'm obsessed with AI art, so that's why I'm asking.
So, like we've said, I think right now the focus is still going to be on like the whole production aspect of making the physical goods. But once we've kind of covered, I mean, I know that we have talked about societal aspects of what the Green Games Guide can be. But in terms of AI, that's actually a good topic and definitely something I'll bring up to our next meeting.
The interesting thing, though, to bring up in regards to that, something I've thought about is, in the same way, educating the consumers is important for telling them, hey, you don't need a big box for your game, or you don't need something that has a plastic insert or whatever, because people think that a cardboard insert means a cheap quality game. Educating them that it's actually a mindful process. But the consumers are not always caring about whether AI art was used in production of the game. Everybody in the industry is like, oh my God, AI art, it's people are losing their jobs and everything, and there's truth to that. But the consumers may not always be thinking that, but a lot of them do. A lot of them are cognizant of that, and it's the same kind of thing. It's educating the consumer in my mind. So I've thought about the correlation in that regard because it's an impact to our industry from both. They're two different subjects, but they're similar in that way. Question out here. Microphone is on the way.
Thank you. How do you count for longevity? So you were talking about these are products that are going to actually be sitting on people's shelves. They're not just kind of throwing them in the recycling. How would you talk to, for instance, a consumer who insists on sleeving all of their cards in a card game because they say they last longer that way?
Yeah, that's a rough one because I make card sleeves, and I get it. It's card sleeves are a lot of waste. Not only do they make the cards last longer, but they're also thrown away, and then new ones are put on them, and that's tough. You want your games to last a long time, especially when they're trading card games, and that's an industry that the side of the industry that I came into from trading card games, and so I've been making card sleeves a long time. So I hope I don't sound too hypocritical on that, but it is a product that my company produces. So I don't have a great answer to that. It is a balance between longevity of the product and keeping it healthy, and also trying not to make excess waste. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on what you said about trading card games, because do you ever comment on that? Because waste is almost part of the design there, right? Because there's always spares, there's so much plastic, they cycle in and out, so you're almost just producing stuff to be thrown away.
I actually have a very much a comment on that is the packaging. There's certain packaging that's been out recently that is, instead of just the standard metallic foil garbage waste that you'll get in the packaging, that is actually made out of paper. And it's paper with some foil, small amount of foil within it, And I can also say that I'm working on a new trading card game myself, and we're looking at having that type of packaging for it. Again, thanks to Frank right here from LudoFact. Thanks, Frank. Brought this to me last year, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I want to put that in my packaging. Our starter decks, same way. I'm not filling them full of plastic. They're all going to be cardboard inserts on those. Did you have another?
Well, I mean, all I can say is that for Star Wars Unlimited, if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking at Anthony over there from Quality at Asmodee. Like the packaging is definitely something that great work has been put into ensuring that it can be recycled.
Yeah. Any other questions out there? Come on, we have 56 seconds.
Down to 50 now.
All right.
All right.
Oh, we'll wrap it up. Oh.
Thank you. It's just a comment really about longevity and longevity being sold to consumers as a positive thing. And actually, the longer your game lasts, you don't have to buy replacement stuff, but also you can share it. You can give it to other people. You can resell it. And I'm wondering about initiatives for publishers where they might take games that people no longer want, giving a kind of percentage back, right? And then reselling those games and not having to produce new ones. I think longevity could be a real positive thing.
Yeah, these are definitely some of the questions that we've asked ourselves. Of course, depending on where you are in the world, like if we compare the US to maybe France, for example, like in terms of size, it may make some initiatives very difficult, but this is something that we've started thinking about it as in what is the next step that we can do from a publisher standpoint.
And that's time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Too.